Opposition to the war took on another perspective, a racial perspective. While the richer white families would send their sons to college to avoid the draft, the blacks were sent to Vietnam. They died in higher proportions than white soldiers. Back home, since the Civil War really, they were oppressed. Even Lyndon B. Johnson's Great Society promises did little. Martin Luther King was battling prejudice and poverty at this time. He specifically called opposition to the war a civil rights issue.
I speak out against this war because I'm disappointed with America.
Martin Luther King held marches in many cities. Mr. Novin attended several of them.
To march in Selma, Alabama with Martin Luther King was the first thing I did. So my entry was really into the civil rights of it all. And what had happened, he marched in Selma and they were all beaten up. The police beat them up and put them in jail. And then he called people to come out and have another march from the countryside into Selma. And that's when I went out. I was going to Northern Illinois University. And what they told us, a car was going out there, and I got in the car with some other people. And they told us that when you get to the outskirts, you have to drive very quickly to get to the black neighborhoods. Otherwise, you're in danger. And literally, when we got to the edge, they started shooting at us in the car. All the cars going in were shot at. But once we got into the black neighborhoods, they took us to a church. Martin Luther King was there. He talked to us, and then they put us in a home. And we stayed in the black neighborhood. And the next day, we marched. Later on, he came to Chicago, and he had, now, when I marched, they had a tremendous amount of military, U.S. military people there. So there were no physical problems the second time. When he came here to Chicago, he called me a troublemaker. He shouldn't be here. He has no right being here. He had two marches, one on the south side that I didn't go to. That was very violent. But a few days later, he marched at Belmont and Cragen, and I went to that. And that was much worse than anything that I saw in Selma, Alabama. Bricks from the buildings on top of us. And kids in these cut t-shirts were coming after us with rubber hoses. When we got back to the parking lot, most of the cars were turned over and burnt. So that happened in Chicago.
In April 1968, King planned a massive Poor People's March in Washington, D.C. Before this, he went to Memphis, Tennessee.
In Tennessee, garbage workers who were mostly black and grossly underpaid went out on strike.
The Carter Commission had just released its famous report, warning our nation is moving toward two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal.
The workers were tired of being treated less than men. King came to express his moral support for the strikers.
Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for rights.
Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th by James Earl Ray. In the wake of King's assassination, riots broke out in 168 towns and cities across the country. It seems like the last person who was able to lead them to justice was now gone. Officials in many cities acted with restraint, and it seemed that they understood the rioters' rage. Chicago was different. Mobs of men, women, and children moved from store to store, breaking windows and taking what they found. Fires blazed out of control.
Let's turn to how some people recall these riots.
I was on the north side of Chicago, and Clark and Diversey, and I had a very small men's store, and when Dr. King was assassinated, I believe within just a few days the rioting started, and I remember being somewhat concerned about the numbers of kids running up and down Clark and Diversey, African American kids who were shouting, saying things like, "We're going to get you too, we're going to get you too," and it was a terrible time.
The day that Martin Luther King got killed, I was working on the west side in a black neighborhood. And then you had riots breaking out all over the city. And I was on 12th Street and Kimball. And everybody just ran out of the school. all the teachers just ran out and left everybody. I mean, the kids were just on their own. And there was one little girl who was just screamed. She was out of her mind. She was like 6 or 7. She didn't know what was happening.
It's terrifying.
So I went and found her card in the office, and I couldn't do very much, but I could take this kid home at least. So I found out her address, and I went to her mother's house, and we went from there. I had my car, so we were able to go. Well, at first, the mother wasn't answering the door, and it was in a basement apartment. And these kids were all marching toward downtown, and I could just see their legs. And I mean, it was dangerous being white then, because this particular day, because they were really angry at the killing of Martin Luther King. And but I got the mother and the daughter to Mount Sinai Hospital to get the daughter taken care of.
You were hiding in the basement.
But yeah, I was hiding,
Protecting these
literally
kids
hiding.
From
This-
the marches coming down the street,
Yeah.
because you didn't
Yeah.
know what was going to happen,
Yeah,
It was
everything
very
just went
scary.
crazy.
Yeah.
I was terrified.
Teachers everybody left.
All the teachers, white and black, left that school. There was a notice that there was a riot breaking out. Because I think we were in school. The day he was
Well, there
killed,
were
or
rumors
the day
going
after.
like crazy, because I was up in the office, and there were all these rumors. The phones kept ringing, and there were all these rumors. They're marching down such and such a street. They're marching down, and then Michigan Avenue was having windows broken, and you'd hear glass breaking.
Yeah, they
and
were
then-
marching from the west side down to downtown.
And
they got to downtown.
And then you saw smoke in the distance. So things were being set afire, and things were just out of control. And people were scared. They didn't know
if
what
you went to
would
the
happen.
west side after this riot, there was no west side.
It changed.
Everything was burnt down.
The whole weekend was a catastrophe. Around 3,000 National Guard troops arrived to back up police. By Saturday afternoon, soldiers and jeeps with machine guns had secured the overpasses along the Eisenhower Expressway from downtown to the west side. Why such violence, including the National Guard? Mayor Daley had ordered police to shoot to kill looters and rioters.
Shoot to kill daily,
Roughly 150,000 people attended King's funeral in Atlanta, Georgia. But about a week before all of this, Lyndon B. Johnson announced he would step down from office at the end of his term.